Hey guys, Jonathan Johnson from the Johnson firm here in Lake Charles. Coming at you from our YouTube page. I'm here with my brother Adam. Today the topic is going to be domestic abuse battery, domestic violence as it relates to criminal charges. If you subscribe to any Facebook page or have any type of social media or still read a newspaper, KPLC and the American Press, they put out arrest reports. We see them basically once a day, see a link come by, hey, here's who got arrested last night. Overwhelmingly, the most frequent thing that we see people getting arrested for is domestic abuse battery, domestic violence. Why is that? And let's talk about it.
I mean, it's pretty easy to explain. Misdemeanor domestic abuse violence or domestic abuse battery is the only misdemeanor that requires the person to be arrested. So whereas if you get a DWI, let's say, and they give you a citation after they take you down, ask you to take breathalyzer or whatever, they give you a citation, you're released. You don't make the news report because you're never booked into the jail. On misdemeanor domestic abuse battery, though, they almost always make an arrest if the person is still located, there at the house. And so that's why it instantly increases your chances of making the news, is because it's one of the few misdemeanors I think it's the only misdemeanor that actually requires you be arrested.
Okay. So that's why we're seeing so many more of them. It's not necessarily that these are, that the stats are that there's way more of this than there is of any other crime, but it is a misdemeanor.
Yeah.
The first offense.
Yeah.
And it requires an arrest. So you're making the news, and that's why we're seeing
Negative booking report.
Right.
Another reason, too, is because the way the statute is, if a child is basically in the home while an allegation is made, I'm not talking about two people, arguing or something and pulling the child back and forth or something like that. All right. A situation like that. I'm talking about if the child is anywhere in the home.
Child's in the back bedroom asleep.
Never
Mom and
wakes
dad
up.
are arguing in the living room.
Never wakes up. Then they're going to say domestic abuse battery, child endangerment, which then makes that charge a felony. So then that guarantees you make the booking report.
Also, with these domestic violence charges, there's a process when you get arrested that, okay, if I get arrested for another crime, even a felony, a bond's going to be automatically set, right?
Yeah.
But even though domestic abuse battery is a misdemeanor,
Right.
in the situation where we're not talking about the child endangerment enhancement, we just have a misdemeanor domestic violence charge. I'm not getting a bond immediately on that, right?
That's right. So they can hold you. It has this unique law in Louisiana called Gwen's law. And what it means is they can hold you for up to 5 days without bond so that you can cool down. All right. Which some of us, believe that that's kind of presuming that we're guilty in the first place. But in any event, it's the law. It's been held to not be unconstitutional. And so, we have to deal with it. If you call the attorney, there are some situations where the state's allowed to waive it, and the judge can waive it. And so that's most of the time what we're trying to get done is just to agree, hey, we won't go back home. All right. We'll get a hotel for a couple of days, but go ahead and set the bond. And so if you hire an attorney, we can a lot of times get around that 5 days. When you don't, a lot of times you wait.
Yeah, so it's not a mandatory 5-day period where you're in jail. It's just that they don't have to set a bond for 5 days. And if somebody doesn't start rattling the cage trying to get you a bond set,
That's a perfect way to say it.
then you're probably going to sit in there for 5 days until you have your first court appearance where they might set a bond.
Right. At least, and most likely at least 3, because, if you're arrested on Friday, they're not going to have the Gwen's Law hearing. And they only do Gwen's Law hearings on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So,
You're in there until Tuesday for sure.
that's right.
The look, not to minimize domestic violence or anything like that, but a lot of times what we're seeing is, okay, husband and wife, girlfriend and boyfriend, whatever, have an argument. All right, neighbor calls because they heard some shouting or something like that. Police arrive and they're making an arrest because they're calming this situation down.
Right.
Maybe everybody's still, pretty worked up, and to kind of return the peace, they're taking someone to jail.
Right. And there's been some awful stories sort of around the country. And I think that's what police officers are afraid of being the one guy that missed it. Right. But I haven't had a whole lot of cases where, my client comes home, has way too much to drink and just decides, you know what, I'm going to start, beating, on my partner, whoever that is. I don't have those cases. What I have is sometimes some volatile relationships that get a little too volatile. All right. And majority of the time, The alleged victim wants to drop the charges. They're going to get some counseling. Everything's going to sort of work out.
Well,
But just
that's
that
kind of where I
point-
was going is we see in a lot of these things, okay, you're arrested. All right. You're arrested on a Tuesday night. You got work Wednesday morning. You got work Thursday morning. You got work Friday morning. And talking about that cooling down period, well, the wife or the partner didn't even really want it going this far. It was an argument between the two of them. It got a little out of hand. And I'm not even talking about violence. I'm just talking about an argument.
Yeah.
And now she's the one in our office saying, hey, I need him to go back to work. Our whole family relies on his ability to provide.
Yeah, she's
this
pressuring me more than he is, or he's pressuring me more than her is. Put it that way.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a real situation that we see, I mean, routinely, where, you know, the alleged victim in the situation is actually the one saying, hey, I'm having to hire the attorney. I'm having to try to get a bond set. I need him to go back to work. We're going to get some counseling and we're going to do the things we need to do to address this.
Right.
But we didn't want it to snowball into this huge situation
Right.
that it's been. And again, that's not every situation, but that's a lot, right?
It's kind of based on the fact that they have to make an arrest, that there's a policy that says you should arrest the person if they're accused of, domestic abuse violence, domestic abuse battery. That increases the amount of people that are coming in. Used to be, if a police officer showed up and an allegation was made, he would investigate it, right? And then there wasn't such a quick determination on, hey, we need to arrest somebody right away. It used to be they'd say, okay, you go get a hotel room, whatever. Then domestic abuse battery kind of increased in awareness. Laws started to change as a result of that. And now policies have been put in place where it says, hey, you got to arrest somebody there.
Yeah.
I even had a video the other day we were watching where the guy's like, she's like, this didn't happen. Like, neighbor called, we were arguing, but there's no marks or anything like that. And he says, look out, they're like, we got to arrest somebody. So they're basically leaving it, to the occupants of the house to figure out which one's taking the arrest.
Which one's
It's a
going
pretty,
to-
that's a sad situation because nobody deserves to be, wrongfully arrested.
Okay. All right. So got the situation. You've been arrested. If you contact an attorney very quickly, there can be a bond set, and an attorney can get to work for you to make sure you don't sit in there for 5 days.
Right, save your job.
Yeah. If that doesn't happen, then you get a bond gets set in 5 days. You're out now, and you've got an attorney to deal with that. Let's talk about the other ways that domestic abuse violence isn't your normal misdemeanor.
Yeah, correct. So it's the only misdemeanor that if you're convicted of it, then you lose your gun rights forever under both federal and state law. That is sort of a relatively recent development, but there's no other misdemeanor that takes away your gun rights. And for those guys or ladies out there that have filled out a form to buy a gun somewhere, it'll ask you, have you ever been found guilty or convicted in a court of law of an offense, domestic abuse violence related offense. It includes misdemeanor. So it's really an important one to make sure you don't just go down there and go, okay, I'll do the year of probation and I'll plead guilty just because, whatever, the system's kind of beat you down. It's really an important one to protect your record on.
Yeah. So, I mean, Louisiana, sports was paradise. You have, we have lots of hunters. We also just have a lot of gun enthusiasts, people that shoot, the sports shoot, collect weapons, things of that nature. Second Amendment's important to a lot of people nationally, but certainly here at home.
Sure.
So you get this misdemeanor charge of domestic abuse violence. You show up at your arraignment date and they say, hey, look, you're going to do 30 days per day probation and here's some fees, but, we're going to send you home and this will be over. And you say, sure, I'm going to enter a plea of guilty. At that moment, you will no longer ever be able to be in possession of a firearm.
While on probation and for a period of 10 years, starting from the date your conviction and sentence becomes final. Under federal law, never. Under state law, all right, after 10 years from the date your conviction and sentence becomes final, all right, then you're allowed to possess a firearm again. But still, you find yourself in a kind of a California, marijuana situation, which is we're selling the stuff, legally under state law, but it's illegal under federal law.
Yep.
What that means is if you're ever on any sort of federal property at all, some sort of refuge hunting in Louisiana.
Oh, we grew up hunting in Tinsall.
That's right.
When we go up for the youth hunt or the November, December draw. Those are federal lands.
And it also means that, let's say that it's been 10 years since the date your conviction sentence becomes final, which is important. It's not 10 years from the date you're arrested.
Yeah.
It's 10 years from the date you complete probation or you pay all fines and complete probation. But that doesn't mean that you're going to be able to successfully buy a gun very easily because under federal law, you're still prevented from buying a firearm. So it's not illegal to possess one after 10 years, all right, in Louisiana, but you still are not going to be able to buy one under federal law.
Under the background check.
Right. So it's really a misdemeanor that people just need to stop using the term misdemeanor domestic abuse violence. It basically has felony consequences from the jump, starting with how long they can keep you in jail and deny you bail.
Now let's talk about the second part. And again, we don't want to minimize anything, but this, same situation can catch you more than once. I mean, and if you find yourself, all right, I go down there and I plead to the first one. All right.
Yeah.
Yes, my gun rights have been terminated. But it happens again. Me and my wife get in another argument later, the same situation. They come out, well, we're arresting somebody. And oh, by the way, you're now the person that has one previous charge and conviction of domestic abuse violence, and you get arrested again. Is that a misdemeanor?
No, it's a felony. Second offense DUV is a felony. So yeah, it only gets more serious when you don't, try and protect yourself on the front end. And I see a lot of people that, they get out of jail, they feel bad for the situation. There's sort of embarrassment there that, the police had to be called in the first place. And, ultimately they just go down there and go, well, as long as I'm not staying in jail, I'll just take a go home deal, pay a fine, go home, be on probation. And then later on they come back and they go, hey, I need to get this expunged off my record because I need my guns rights back. And we have to have the conversation with expungement ain't got nothing to do with your gun rights. It just means removed from public view. You've lost your gun rights for another 8 years. Okay. And dads not being able to take their kids hunting because they just didn't hire an attorney and fast tracked, just to kind of made assumptions about misdemeanor is just less serious than a felony. A lot of times wind up in situations where, it's more difficult to fix the problem at that point.
Got a last question I have is, are there higher levels of charges that one can get if there's serious violence in a situation?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, so these situations where it is charged and arrested as misdemeanor domestic violence, it's kind of a recognition that there was not some high level of injury or something like that.
That's right. There wasn't serious bodily injury or there wasn't a dangerous weapon used.
Okay, so we are talking about, and again, we're not minimizing the more minor situations that we've either been through or we know somebody that's been through.
That's correct.
In the 6 degrees of separation, you're going to know somebody that's been through something like this.
Right.
And so by it being arrested like that, we're talking about these situations that are on the lower end of the spectrum as far as the violence that actually occurred.
Sorry.
But the consequences are still
The same, basically. I mean, they're not the exact same, but with respect to how long they can keep you in jail for, the gun rights, those are felony type consequences associated with a misdemeanor offense. And there's just no way around that.
Yeah. All right. Well, we appreciate it. That's all we have on this topic today. Again, check out our YouTube page because we're going to have lots of content on things that we think are relevant to you guys. Thanks.